By the time the laughter died, the courtroom did not feel like a room anymore. It felt like a trap that had sprung shut on the wrong person. Maya Brooks stood at the plaintiff's table, fingers pressed flat against the wood, knuckles pale where no one could see them. Her navy blazer was a size too big. Her curls pulled back tight, her face calm in a way her heart was not. Across the well, Judge Leonard Patterson still had the ghost of a smile on his lips, the echo of what he had said moments earlier hanging in the air. This is a courtroom, not a high school debate club. He was not smiling now. Maya had just walked the court through a timeline that left no safe place for lies to hide. She had laid out Ethan Reynolds' threats, his fake lease violations, every payment Teresa Carter had scraped together to keep a roof over her children. She had cited cases that made the landlord's attorney, Mark Cole, lose his rhythm and flip pages with a hand that would not stay steady. The gallery had gone quiet. Reporters scribbled. A row of older black folks on the back bench leaned forward, eyes fixed on the teenager who stood where no one expected her to stand. At the end of the row, Teresa sat between her mother and her two kids, clutching a folded tissue, looking at Maya the way people look at the last dry piece of land. Judge Patterson regarded Maya like he was seeing her for the first time, like he was trying to line up what he thought she was with what she had just done to his courtroom. Confusion flickered, then something sharper. Who are you really? Miss Brooks. The question was not casual. It scraped. It carried every insult he had thrown at her that morning, every time he had let the room laugh at her for daring to speak. Maya reached into her worn briefcase. Her hand did not shake now. She pulled out a sealed envelope, walked it to the bailiff, and met the man's eyes just long enough to make sure he would not fumble this. The envelope made its slow journey up to the bench, paper against paper, loud in the hush. Patterson slid it open. He read the first line, then the second. His eyes darted back to Maya, then down again. His fingers tightened on the document. Maya Elise Brooks, admitted to the Illinois bar. Issue date, last year. The silence broke all at once. She is a real attorney. Can they even do that at 16? Is this for real? Whispers crackled through the room. Mark Cole stared, jaw set, but eyes wide. Ethan Reynolds turned in his chair to look at Maya like she had lied to him personally, like genius itself was an insult. Teresa's mother pressed a hand to her mouth. Teresa's son tugged at her sleeve, whispering something she was too stunned to hear. Patterson's face flushed a deep, mottled red. For a moment, he looked less like a judge and more like a man who had just realized he might be the punchline in someone else's story. He cleared his throat once, then again, but no words came out. 10-minute recess, he managed finally. Voice rough. This court will stand in recess for 10 minutes. The gavel cracked down. The spell broke, but the air stayed heavy. Maya sat slowly, the wooden chair suddenly too hard, the table too close. Her breath came back in pieces. Around her, the room churned with whispers and hurried footsteps, but all she could hear were the earlier words, replaying like a bad recording. A kid playing dress-up. Is this a prank? You cannot be serious, Miss Brooks. She had swallowed them when they were said, forced herself to focus on the law and not on the heat in her chest. Now, in the brief pause he had given the room, the hurt rose like smoke. There was a time she had believed something simple. Before she ever stood here, Maya had believed that if you did everything right, if you told the truth clearly enough, the system would stand with you. Her fingers brushed the edge of her bar card inside the envelope's twin lying in her briefcase. Out beyond the windows, Chicago traffic hummed, oblivious. This moment, this stunned room, this judge choking on his own contempt turned back on him, had not started today. It had started years earlier, far from polished wood and marble columns, in a cramped kitchen on the south side, where a girl with tired eyes and a second-hand laptop first decided to see what the law could do. And back there, she had still believed in fair fights. Southside Chicago did not look like the skyline on postcards. It was brick and cracked sidewalks and corner churches and buses that came late in the winter wind. It was also the only place that had ever made sense to Maya Brooks. She lived with her grandmother in a narrow two-story row house tucked between a boarded-up storefront and a hair-braiding shop that never seemed to close. The house was small, the paint peeling on the porch rail, but inside every room had books. Stacked on shelves, piled in milk crates, leaning in wobbly towers against the walls. Clara Brooks called it her insurance. Policy. You cannot always stop people from trying you, she would say, sliding another used paperback onto an already packed shelf. But if you know how the world works, you do not have to let them run you over. Clara had spent 30 years teaching third graders on the South Side. She had taught kids to read who came to school hungry, showed them how to multiply fractions while gunshots popped 3 blocks away. When she retired, her salary stopped, but her habits did not. She still woke up at 5, still made coffee too strong, still circled typos in the newspaper with a red pen. Maya had grown up in that world of red ink and soft warnings. By 7, she could sound out every street name on the bus route. That was the year Samuel Harris, an old friend of Clara's and a recently retired attorney, dropped off a cardboard box full of law books he did not want to move again. Maya dragged it into the living room like treasure, while other kids in the neighborhood flipped through comic books. She flipped through casebooks, stumbling over Latin phrases and then looking them up just so they would not beat her. At 12, she discovered the university library downtown. A volunteer at the community center had shown her how to get a student access card for free. On Saturdays, she would ride 2 buses, walk through the glass doors like she belonged there, and lose herself among first-year law students, pretending not to notice the skinny black girl in a hoodie reading their textbooks. One afternoon, a group of them had gotten into an argument over a Supreme Court opinion. Maya had listened until she could not stand it anymore. She had walked over, hard hammering, and said politely, "I think you're missing what the dissent is actually saying." They laughed at first. Then she broke down the opinion, line by line. The laughter faded. One of them finally said, half impressed and half annoyed, "How old are you old enough to read?" She had answered, cheeks burning. By 16, with Clara's reluctant blessing and Harris's quiet coaching, Maya had taken the Illinois bar exam through a special program for gifted students who had completed a certain number of accredited courses online. She had studied at the kitchen table, headphones on, while Clara graded church homework packets and pretended not to be terrified. When the envelope came in the mail, Maya had opened it on the porch, hands trembling. Passed. They had not thrown a party. Clara had made macaroni and cheese from scratch and told her granddaughter to sit down. "You understand what this means, baby," she said, eyes shining and worried at the same time. "If people find out, they are going to want a lot from you. They are going to put you on TV and talk about you on shows they do not let folks like us host." Maya had nodded, the weight of it pressing on her chest. "I just want to help people, Grandma, not be a circus act." So they told almost no one. Harris knew. A couple of cousins knew, and that was it. To the rest of the world, Maya was just the quiet girl who always had her nose in a book. Inside, she carried a simple belief she never quite said out loud. If I understand the law, if I prepare better than anyone else and tell the truth exactly as it is, the system will have to be fair. It might be slow, it might be stubborn, but it cannot be completely blind. That belief was still intact the afternoon she heard Teresa Carter crying at the corner store. It was one of those cold days where the wind found every gap in your coat. Maya was helping Clara load a plastic basket with canned vegetables and a bag of rice when she heard the sound. Not loud, but raw. At the end of the aisle, Teresa stood at the counter, one arm wrapped around her middle like she was holding herself together. Her hair was pulled back in a rush and her eyes were red. Mr. Lee, the cashier who had watched Maya grow up, was leaning over the register, listening. "He says we gotta be out by the end of the month," Teresa choked. "I have not missed a payment. Not one." Maya watched as Teresa dug into her bag with shaking hands, pulled out a crumpled notice, and laid it on the counter. Even from a few feet away, Maya could see the word eviction. "He says I got too many people in the unit," Teresa went on. "That it's a lease violation. It is me and my 2 babies. That is it. I do not have anybody else. He just wants to raise the rent for somebody who can pay more." Clara touched Maya's elbow lightly, a silent warning not to get pulled into other people's business. But Maya's chest tightened. She had spent years reading about things like this in abstract terms: unlawful detainers, retaliatory evictions. It was different seeing it spill out of someone standing 3 feet away, clutching a plastic bag of groceries she might not be able to store in a home much longer. After Teresa left the counter, Maya followed her outside. The sky was heavy and gray. Teresa stopped by the bus stop, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Ms. Carter," Maya said, her voice softer than she felt. Teresa glanced over, confused, then recognized her. "Maya Brooks." "Right. You help at the church sometimes. Yes, ma'am. I could not help overhearing inside. Teresa sighed, the sound full of a kind of tired that sleep did not fix. It is a mess, baby. Do not worry yourself about it. Maya hesitated. She was 17 and standing in front of a woman who had lived more life than she had read about. But Teresa's shoulders were shaking. Do you have your lease with you? Any of the notices he has sent you? Teresa frowned. You in some kind of law class or something? Something like that, Maya said. I have been studying housing law for a while. If you want, I could take a look. Maybe there is something you can use. For a moment, Teresa's expression said exactly what she was thinking. What is this girl going to do that I have not already tried? The world had not trained her to expect rescue from teenagers, but the bus was late, and the panic was close, and Maya's eyes were steady in a way that made it hard to brush her off. I have everything at home, Teresa muttered. Receipts, letters. I keep it all, just in case. Would you be okay if I stopped by later? Maya asked. I will not promise anything I cannot do, but I can promise I will read every page. Teresa let out a long breath, the kind that sounds like surrender and hope mixed together. Fine. I live in Building C at the Lakeside Complex, 3rd floor. If you really want to look at this mess, come on by. That night, Maya sat at the cramped kitchen table, Teresa's folder open in front of her, receipts, bank statements, the lease printed in tiny type. The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. She went line by line, comparing the lease to what she knew of Chicago's residential landlord and tenant ordinance. She circled clauses that were flat out illegal, highlighted places where Reynolds had misquoted the law in his letters. Clara moved quietly around the kitchen, making tea, watching her granddaughter with an expression that held both pride and dread. You know this might not end the way you think, she said finally, setting a mug down next to the papers. Law does not always show up for folks who look like us. Maya nodded without looking up. I know. I am not sure you do, Clara replied gently. There are rules. And then there is how they treat people from this side of town when those rules get inconvenient. Maya underlined a sentence in Teresa's lease. If the rules are on her side, they have to listen, she insisted. That is the point, right? The law is supposed to protect tenants from exactly this. Clara sighed, a soft, weary sound. In a perfect world, yes. The next day, Maya took her notes to Teresa's apartment. They sat at a small table while Teresa's kids colored on the floor. Maya explained what she had found, what the landlord was allowed to do, and what he absolutely was not. You have a case, Maya said, finishing her explanation. The occupancy clause he is using is not enforceable the way he is trying to use it. You have always paid on time. He cannot just push you out for no reason. Teresa stared at her. You really think I can fight him? I do, Maya answered, and I think he is counting on you not knowing that. That evening, as the sun slid low, Maya and Teresa walked across the courtyard to show the paperwork to Mr. Johnson, an older neighbor who had lived in the complex longer than anyone else. His cane tapped the concrete as he read through Maya's notes. You got your ducks in a row, he said finally, adjusting his glasses. You are sharp, little lady. Maya felt a flicker of pride. But let me tell you something, Johnson went on, lowering his voice. These folks, they do not need to be right to win. They need money. A smooth-talking white lawyer and a judge who is already tired before your case even gets called. Teresa swallowed. Maya set her jaw. If we show up with everything in order, the judge will see that. Johnson looked at her, really looked at her, like he was measuring how much of her hope he was about to step on. I hope you are right, he said quietly. I truly do. Just do not confuse their rules with your protection. Maya heard him. She did. But that night, back at the kitchen table with Clara's old typewriter humming to life, she chose to hold on to the belief that had gotten her this far. She drafted a letter on Teresa's behalf, citing specific code sections, demanding that Ethan Reynolds immediately withdraw the eviction notice and warning that failure to do so would result in legal action. She printed it, signed Teresa's name with Teresa's permission, and walked it to the post office herself to send by certified mail. They waited. Reynolds never responded. 2 weeks later, Teresa found a new envelope taped to her door. A summons. Housing court. Maya stood on the stoop with her, the paper crackling between them as they read it. Case number, date, time, and at the bottom, in small, neat type, in the matter of Carter versus Reynolds, before the Honorable Leonard J. Patterson. Maya traced the judge's name with her eyes. She did not know yet how that name would sound years later, echoing over a gavel in a room full of people doubting her. In that moment, it was just ink that meant someone in a black robe would have to hear them. Clara watched her from the window as Maya gathered Teresa's papers into an old gray briefcase Harris had given her. That night, Maya stood in front of the mirror in her small bedroom, the briefcase at her feet, studying the reflection of a skinny 17-year-old in a borrowed blazer. She whispered to herself, testing the words like a promise. If we do this right, they will have to listen. The court date sat on Teresa's fridge like a countdown. Every time she reached for the milk, her eyes landed on it, and her chest tightened all over again. In the weeks leading up to it, she tried to do what everyone told her to do. She called the legal aid number taped to the bulletin board at the community center. The woman on the line was polite but tired, the kind of tired that comes from saying the same bad news all day long. Housing case. Yes, ma'am. We can put you on the waiting list. How long? Hard to say. We are completely booked for the next few months. I do not have months, Teresa said, voice cracking. I have a court date in 3 weeks. I understand. I am so sorry. Show up with your paperwork. Ask the judge for time. Sometimes they work with you. Sometimes. At Clara's kitchen table that night, Teresa stared at her phone while Maya spread papers out in neat stacks. I called 3 private lawyers, Teresa said. The cheapest one wanted a retainer bigger than my rent. He kept talking about how eviction cases move fast, like that was supposed to scare me into signing. Her hands shook. She pressed them flat on the table. I cannot pay that. I cannot even pay a third of that. We will figure something out, Maya said, even though the words felt thin. Teresa tried to laugh and failed. I just keep seeing my kids asleep in the back of my car. Like that is the movie playing in my head on repeat. Maya wrote dates on a yellow pad. Rent received. Notice posted. Letter sent. She checked each receipt against the bank statements, then against the lease. She built a timeline so clean you could have run a finger along it and not picked up a speck of dust. At first, that was all she thought she would do. Prepare, organize, hand Teresa a script of what to say. Maybe Harris would come down to court and sit with them. You can go in and tell the judge exactly what happened, Maya said, more to herself than to Teresa. Show him you paid. Show him the letters. Teresa nodded, but her eyes were far away. I have never talked in a courtroom. Folks like him do this every day. He knows what to say to make me sound crazy. The next morning, Maya took the bus downtown with Teresa to file some final paperwork at the clerk's office. The Daily Center lobby was all glass and security, and people in suits walking fast, like they were late for something important. Teresa held her manila envelope so tight the edges bent. At the counter, the clerk stamped their forms without looking up for a full minute. Finally, he slid the papers back and asked, "All right, who is the attorney of record for Ms. Carter?" Teresa opened her mouth, then closed it. "I do not have one," she said quietly. "I cannot afford one." The clerk shrugged in that resigned way people do when they have heard the same story too many times. "Then you are pro se." Teresa frowned. "I am what representing yourself," he said. "Plaintiff can appear pro se if they cannot get counsel. Just means you speak for yourself in front of the judge." He said it like he was explaining how to use the copy machine. For him, it was routine. For Teresa, it might as well have been a medical diagnosis. After they stepped away from the counter, Teresa leaned against the wall, breathing shallow. "So it is just me," she whispered. Me against him and his lawyer. Maya studied her. The too thin jacket, the tired face, the way she kept apologizing for almost bumping into people who did not even notice her. In Maya's mind, she saw the courtroom like a diagram. On one side, Ethan Reynolds in a tailored suit with a professional mouthpiece to speak the language of the system. On the other side, a woman working nights at a grocery store, trying not to cry while she thought about her kids' backpacks in the trunk of a car. Something hot rose in Maya's throat. "I will not let you stand in there alone," she said. Teresa blinked. "Baby, what are you talking about? Just give me a little time." Maya answered, "Please." Back home, after dropping Teresa off, Maya went straight to her room. She closed the door, opened her laptop, and clicked through folders until she found the PDF she almost never looked at. Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission. Admission letter, license number, her name printed in black and white. She stared at the screen. If she told the court, if she walked in as Attorney Brooks instead of just Maya from the neighborhood, everything would change. Not just for Teresa, for her. Reporters sniffed out stories like this. A black teenager passing the bar early was the kind of thing people turned into headlines, the kind they spun into feel-good segments sandwiched between car commercials. She imagined cameras outside her house, random cousins asking for help with cases she could not touch, online comments tearing her apart. The internet loved you 1 minute and chewed you up the next. She closed her eyes. Another picture pushed in. Teresa at the counter, voice shaking. Mr. Johnson talking about smooth white lawyers and tired judges. Reynolds writing checks without blinking while he pushed families out like they were overdue library books. Maybe it was selfish to keep the bar card in a folder like a secret trophy. While people she knew were drowning, maybe it was also dangerous to pull it out. That night, Clara found her still at the desk, the laptop light washing her face pale. The admission letter glowed on the screen. So, Clara said, leaning on the door frame, "You thinking about using that piece of paper for more than wallpaper?" Maya let out a breath that shook more than she wanted. "If I show it, Grandma, everything gets loud. People will make it about me, not about Teresa or anyone else. And if you do not show it, then Teresa goes pro se against a landlord with money, and a lawyer who does this all day," Maya said, "and a judge who might not listen to a word she says." Clara walked in and sat on the edge of the bed. "You do not owe this world your peace," she murmured, "not even if you can help. You do not owe anybody your childhood." Maya swallowed. "But if I do nothing, and she loses her home when I could have stood up there with her, how am I supposed to live with that?" Clara studied her for a long moment. "If you choose this," she said slowly, "you need to understand. It will not just be about winning or losing this case. People will push back. They will question you, your age, your right to be in that room. Some of them will not be polite about it." "I know," Maya whispered. "No, you think you know." Clara's voice was gentle, but it carried weight. When the world realizes a black girl is smarter than it decided she is allowed to be, it does not clap. It tests her. Hard. Maya looked back at the screen. "Then let them test me," she said. "I am tired of watching people like Reynolds pass those tests just because nobody ever bothers to question them." Clara held her gaze, then nodded once. "All right, then do it with your eyes open." The next day, Maya went back to the clerk's office alone. Her palms were sweating, but her steps were steady. "I need to update the appearance for Carter versus Reynolds," she told the clerk. Maya Brooks, representing the plaintiff. The clerk typed her name in, glanced at her, then at the screen. He hesitated like he wanted to ask a question, then changed his mind and hit enter. Walking out of the building, Maya felt like she had stepped across a line no one could see but her. On one side was the girl who read case law for fun. On the other was someone the system would have to confront, whether it wanted to or not. She did not tell the court yet that she was licensed. She wanted to see, just for one moment, if a teenager telling the truth clearly could be enough to make them listen, without a fancy credential waved in their faces. The morning of the first hearing, the sky over downtown Chicago was the color of old concrete. Maya stood in front of the row house mirror in a navy blazer borrowed from Ms. Jackson next door. The shoulders were too wide, and the fabric scratched her neck. But when she pulled her hair back and picked up the gray briefcase, something inside her clicked into place. Clara handed her a packed lunch she probably would not eat, and kissed her forehead. "You walk in there like you belong," she said. "Because you do." At the metal detector outside the courtroom, the bailiff glanced at Maya, then at the briefcase. His mouth twisted into a half grin. "Career day at school, kid." Maya felt the words hit, the familiar sting of being dismissed before you even opened your mouth. For a heartbeat, she considered backing up, letting Teresa go in alone, telling herself she had done enough. Instead, she tightened her grip on the handle, looked the bailiff in the eye, and stepped past him toward the door. By the time they called Carter versus Reynolds, the courtroom felt like a crowded bus at rush hour. Every bench was full. Tenants clutching folders, landlords in pressed shirts, a few people from the neighborhood who had heard about the teenager in housing court and wanted to see for themselves. The clerk read the case name into the microphone. Teresa's legs started bouncing so hard the whole bench shook. She stood, then sat, then forced herself up again when Maya rose beside her. "Good morning, Your Honor," Maya said, stepping to the table. Maya Brooks, representing the plaintiff, Teresa Carter. Judge Leonard Patterson looked up from the file in front of him. His eyes traveled from Maya's too big blazer to her small frame to the cheap briefcase at her feet. His brows knit. Then he let out a breath that sounded a lot like disbelief. "You are representing her?" he asked. "This is not a mock trial, Miss Brooks." The room reacted before Maya could. A ripple of laughter swept through the gallery. Someone in the back snorted. A man in a suit 2 rows behind Teresa shook his head and whispered something that made his friend chuckle. Heat rushed up Maya's neck. She kept her hands flat on the table so no one would see them tense. "No, Your Honor," she said. "This is a real eviction case. Ms. Carter is facing displacement from her home." "That much I gathered from the caption," Patterson replied. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Kids these days, everybody thinks watching courtroom clips on TikTok makes them a lawyer. More laughter. Teresa flinched, like each chuckle was a slap. On the back row, an older black woman in a church hat folded her arms and gave the judge a stare sharp enough to cut glass. For the next several minutes, Patterson did not just question Maya, he performed her. "How old are you, Miss Brooks? 17, Your Honor." 17. He leaned back in his chair, the robe pulling at his shoulders. "When I was 17, I was worried about algebra, not cross-examining witnesses." A few people laughed. Others shifted in their seats, uneasy. He made a joke about school plays, about college applications, about how serious the law was, and how unserious it looked when children tried it on like a costume. Through it all, Maya kept her eyes fixed somewhere just above his left shoulder and counted her breaths. 1 for every insult, 2 for every laugh. She thought about Teresa's boys sleeping in a back seat, thought about Reynolds writing checks without blinking, thought about every older neighbor who had told her their stories, their evictions, their losses, and said it did not matter because the judge never really listened anyway. When Patterson finally stopped amusing himself, he sighed. "Fine, Miss Brooks. Since you are determined, I will let you dig this hole yourself. Present your argument." Something in the room shifted. The laughter thinned. Even the reporters who had come for the novelty of a teen in court flipped to new pages in their notebooks. Maya straightened her papers. Her voice, when it came, was steady. "Your Honor, this is what happened." She walked the court through the timeline, date by date. Rent paid on time every month. The sudden eviction notice with the vague claim of too many occupants. The clause in the lease that did not match city ordinance. The certified letter demanding Reynolds withdraw the notice. Sent and ignored. She pulled out highlighted copies of Teresa's receipts, emails from the property manager, printouts of the Chicago residential landlord and tenant ordinance. She did not plead. She did not apologize for speaking. She just laid out the facts like bricks, stacking them until they formed something too solid to kick over. As she spoke, the smirks faded. Mark Cole, the landlord's lawyer, stopped smirking entirely and started flipping frantically through his own copy of the lease. Reynolds himself stared, lips tightening, the color rising in his cheeks. When Maya finished, there was no laughter, only the soft rustle of paper and the hum of the air vents. Patterson cleared his throat. "I will take the matter under advisement," he said. "We will reconvene after I have reviewed the documents." Gavel. Case continued. In the hallway afterward, Reynolds' face was tight with fury. He brushed past Maya hard enough to make her stumble. "This is ridiculous," he hissed to Cole. "I am not about to get embarrassed by some little girl from the projects." "Fix it." Cole put a hand on his client's arm, lowering his voice, but Maya still caught enough. "There are other avenues we can pursue. She wants to play lawyer. We will see how she likes being treated like one." The next morning, Maya was back at the courthouse with Teresa, ready to drop off a supplemental filing. They were halfway to the clerk's office when 2 uniformed officers stepped into their path. "Miss Brooks," one of them asked. Maya's stomach flipped. "Yes, we need you to come down to the station to answer a few questions regarding a complaint about evidence in Carter versus Reynolds." Teresa grabbed her arm. "Is she under arrest?" "No, ma'am," the officer said quickly. "We just want to clear some things up." Maya's mind raced. Complaint. Evidence. She thought of the emails she had printed, the forensic report Harris's old contact had helped her get. "If I go with you," she said carefully, "can my grandmother know?" "Where I am, we can make sure she is notified," the other officer replied. Teresa was shaking. "You do not have to go. You can ask for a lawyer, right? That is what they say on TV." "It is okay," Maya lied. "I am not hiding anything." The interrogation room was smaller than she expected. Bare walls, metal table, 2 chairs, a fluorescent light overhead that buzzed just loud enough to fray nerves. One officer sat across from her, hit a button on a small recorder, and recited the case number. "We received a complaint alleging that some of the emails you introduced in court may have been altered," he said. "We need to know where you got them, how you stored them, whether anyone else had access." Maya folded her hands so he would not see them clench. "The emails came from Ms. Carter's account," she said. "I had them extracted by a digital forensics specialist. I have a chain of custody log. Do you have that with you? It is in my case file. At home." The questions kept coming. Dates, times, names. Did she understand how serious fabricating evidence was? What exactly was her role in preparing the documents? Who paid for the forensic work? With every answer she gave, she could feel the doubt in the room, thick as the cold light above them. The officer's tone never got aggressive, but it never warmed either. "Look, Miss Brooks," he said eventually, leaning back. "You are very young. If you got in over your head trying to help somebody, now would be the time to be honest about it." She stared at him. "I did not fake anything. The landlord is lying." The door opened before he could reply. A man in a dark suit with graying hair and sharp eyes stepped in. "That will be enough," he said. The officer frowned. "And you are Samuel Harris, counsel for Miss Brooks. This interview is over." "We are just asking questions," the officer protested. "She is not under arrest." "Exactly," Harris answered. "And unless you have probable cause to change that, you have no basis to keep detaining a minor in a locked room while you fish for something that is not there." He turned to Maya. "Come on, kid." Walking out past the front desk, Maya felt every pair of eyes on her. She kept her shoulders square, her face blank, the way she had taught herself to do on the street when someone looked too long. Outside, the cold air hit her like a slap. She exhaled, but the breath did not take the tightness in her chest with it. For the first time, the thought lodged itself in her mind like a stone. "I told the truth, and it still was not enough for them to believe me." On the bus ride home, she watched an officer help an older white woman with directions and thought about the difference in tone. At home, she went straight to the kitchen. Clara was already there, like she had known. "Word travels fast around here," Clara said quietly. Harris called. "You all right?" Maya slid into a chair. "I am fine." Clara pulled her into a hug anyway. "You are playing on their field now," she murmured into Maya's hair. "They do not play fair on that field." Maya pulled back and looked at the stack of Teresa's files waiting on the table. Email printouts, bank records, a worn lease. "Then we stop playing in the dark," she said, voice low but fierce. "We make them play where everybody can see." The next hit did not come in the courtroom, it came in the mail. A thick packet from Reynolds' legal team landed on Teresa's doormat. When Maya opened it at the kitchen table, her stomach dropped. There were bank statements with Teresa's name on them, showing deposits from a company she had never heard of, Harmony Solutions. The cover motion claimed Teresa had been hiding extra income, lying about hardship, gaming the system. They filed a counterclaim for defamation too, accusing Teresa and Maya of destroying a respected landlord's reputation. In court, Maya argued hard against it, but Patterson frowned at the papers in front of him, flipping back and forth. "The court will hear the motion," he said. "The counterclaim will be joined for now." It felt like the floor shifted under her. Suddenly, they were not just trying to keep a roof over Teresa's kids. They were fighting off a lawsuit that could bankrupt her and paint Maya as some reckless teenage agitator. By day, Maya drafted responses, researched cases about retaliation and abusive litigation. By night, she tried to finish calculus homework with red eyes and a brain that would not slow down. At school, a counselor pulled her aside. "I heard you have a court thing going on," he said carefully. "You are very bright. You do not want this to follow you when you apply to college." A couple of classmates made jokes about her becoming famous for getting sued. None of them asked how Teresa was sleeping. It was Aaron who brought her the first real crack in Reynolds' new story. "Harmony Solutions is not real," he told her, spinning his laptop around. "It is a shell. No employees, no real office. And look at this." He clicked through registry records, the holding company behind. Harmony was owned by another entity, which connected to another set of properties. At the end of the trail sat a familiar name, Ethan Reynolds. "He has been moving money through fake companies," Aaron said. and Harmony is the one supposedly paying Teresa. He is fabricating her income with his own fraud machine. Maya stared at the screen, a cold anger settling into her bones. Reynolds was not just a bad landlord cutting corners. He was part of a whole structure built to squeeze people who had the least room to be squeezed. That was when Lucas Harper appeared, a private investigator with a too calm voice and eyes that did not smile. He showed up outside Maya's building one afternoon, chatting with neighbors, asking what they knew about the girl playing lawyer. He waited by the courthouse parking lot another day, leaning against a car in a black coat. Cases like this tend to get messy, he said when she tried to walk past. Maybe drop it while you can. No shame in knowing when to quit. She kept walking, but his words followed her home. Teachers grew cooler. Friends changed the subject when she walked up. Even at church, a few older members pulled Clara aside and asked if it was wise to let the girl stir up trouble. One night, after another marathon session at the table, Maya went to the bathroom and stared into the mirror. Her eyes were ringed with shadows. She looked less like a teenager and more like the exhausted lawyers she saw downtown. Somewhere along the way, pop quizzes and pep rallies had disappeared, replaced by deadlines stamped with court seals. Back in her room, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She answered. "Walk away, little lawyer," a voice said. Calm, male, unfamiliar. "Nobody will remember you if something happens." The line went dead. For a few seconds, Maya stood there, shaking so hard she had to sit down. The house was quiet. The only sound the refrigerator humming in the kitchen and Clara's faint snore down the hall. Then she opened her laptop, pulled up a blank document, titled it Motion to Strike Fraudulent Financial Evidence. If I back off now, she thought, fingers finding the keys again. It is not just Reynolds who wins. It is every ugly trick people like him use. Every time they count on us to be too scared to fight. The deeper Maya and Aaron dug into Harmony Solutions, the less it looked like a one-off scam and the more it looked like a doorway into something bigger. One night, hunched over Aaron's laptop at Clara's kitchen table, Maya watched line after line of transactions scroll by. Same shell company, different tenants, different cities. Detroit, Atlanta, Houston. Always small payments, always just enough to make it look like low-income renters were hiding money. Aaron frowned at a document he had pulled from a public database. Hold up. That task force you sent me an article about the other week. The one investigating predatory housing schemes. Look at the exhibit list. Maya leaned in. There it was. Chart almost identical to the one on Aaron's screen. Same routing numbers, same fake vendor, Harmony Solutions. The only difference was the names at the end of the chain. They have been on him for a while, Aaron said quietly. You might have just handed them the last piece they needed. A few days later, Maya stood in front of Judge Patterson again. This time, there was no joking when her case was called. The courtroom was still busy, but there was an extra charge to the air, like everyone could sense something under the surface. Your Honor, Maya began, I am submitting documentation that shows Harmony Solutions is not a legitimate employer of Ms. Carter. It is a shell company controlled by Mr. Reynolds through a series of entities he uses to manipulate financial records. She walked the judge through the corporate tree, the registration records, the absurdly similar contracts. She explained how the supposed income line on Teresa's bank statements matched fabricated deposits into other tenants' accounts in other cities under investigation by federal authorities. For once, Patterson did not interrupt. The sarcasm in his eyes faded, replaced by a narrowing focus. You are telling me, he said slowly, that the evidence presented to this court to support the counterclaim may itself be part of an ongoing fraud investigation. Yes, Your Honor. The tenants in those cases look a lot like Ms. Carter, people with the least amount of power having the most blame placed on them. Before he could respond, the double doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Two men in dark suits walked in, badges already in their hands. The bailiff stepped toward them, then glanced up at the bench. Your Honor, one of the agents said, we are with the United States Attorney's Office. We have a warrant for the arrest of Ethan Reynolds. The room went silent in that particular way only a courtroom can. Reynolds jerked to his feet, color draining from his face. This is a setup, he shouted. She did this. He pointed straight at Maya. This little girl cooked all this up to make me look bad. Agent Martinez, the taller of the two, ignored him and approached the defense table. Mr. Reynolds, you are under arrest for tax fraud, wire fraud, and a pattern of tenant exploitation. You have the right to remain silent. The words echoed off the wood paneling. Maya watched, stunned, as handcuffs clicked around the landlord's wrists. For a heartbeat, she felt a flicker of satisfaction. Then a cold realization settled in behind it. If the feds had been building a case this big, how many people had already been hurt before anyone in power decided to care? As the agents led Reynolds out, the gallery erupted into whispers. Some people looked at Maya with open admiration, others with wary awe, like she had just pulled lightning out of the sky. Patterson banged his gavel. Order. This court will recess while we determine how to proceed in light of these developments. Later, in a narrow hallway outside his chambers, Maya waited while Harris spoke with the judge behind a half-closed door. She had only meant to pass on the federal documents she and Aaron had found. Now she could hear fragments of something else. I grew up in a mill town, Patterson was saying, his voice lower than she had ever heard it. My parents lost our house when I was 12. Landlord sold the building from under us. We slept in a church basement for 3 weeks. There was a pause. So you understand exactly what this kind of case feels like, Harris replied. I did once, Patterson said. Then I started seeing 100 of them a month. It is easy to get numb when all you see is paper and people yelling. You start thinking they are all the same kind of noise. Maya stepped back from the door, heart thudding. The man who had mocked her in front of a packed courtroom had spent part of his childhood the way Teresa was trying to avoid. Somewhere between then and the black robe, he had decided that other people's emergencies were just items on a docket. Even the ones who had lived the struggle could become part of the machinery that ignored it. When court resumed, Patterson sat a little straighter. His tone was still formal, but something in it had changed. In light of the evidence presented regarding Harmony Solutions and the federal investigation into Mr. Reynolds, this court will be reviewing the counterclaim with extreme scrutiny, he said. And let me make one thing clear. This courtroom will not be used as a weapon against people who are just trying to keep a roof over their heads. The words landed like a small, unexpected earthquake. Maya walked out into the late afternoon light, feeling both triumphant and unsettled. The judge's shift, the arrest, the gasp in the room. It all felt like proof that doing the work mattered. But in the days that followed, as the story spread and reporters called and strangers tracked down her email address, another picture emerged. Messages poured in. A man in Detroit whose landlord had suddenly discovered a series of lease violations when he organized a tenants meeting. A grandmother in Atlanta who swore her bank statements had been doctored to make it look like she was hiding income. A single father in Houston who had been told his eviction was about occupancy just after he complained about mold. Different cities, same tactics, same kind of names in the fine print. Maya sat on the edge of her bed one night, laptop warm on her legs, scrolling through paragraph after paragraph of other people's fear. She had once believed that if you piled up enough proof in front of the law, it would eventually tip in your favor. Now she could see how many hands had to steady the scale. Aaron digging through databases, Harris walking into that interrogation room, Clara holding her up when she wanted to fall down. Even the reporters whose questions had brought more eyes onto Reynolds than he ever wanted. The law did not stand on its own. It moved when people pushed it. Teresa's case was still in motion. There were hearings ahead, orders to be written. But as Maya looked at the inbox full of stories that sounded like echoes of their own, one thought settled so deep it almost hurt. Teresa's just one of many. If I stop at her, this will just be a good story we tell about that one time a landlord got what was coming. She closed the laptop, the glow fading from her room. If it is going to mean anything, she thought, it has to be more than a win. It has to be a warning. By the time the case limped into closing arguments, Ethan Reynolds was gone from the defense table, but his shadow was not. His name sat at the top of the pleadings, his money still paying for Mark Cole to show up in an expensive suit and try to stitch together what was left of their story. The counterclaim was a mess. Witnesses who swore they had seen Teresa hiding cash later admitted under questioning that they had been paid to sign affidavits they barely read. One woman broke down on the stand and said she thought she was signing a petition about tenant rights. The neat stack of papers Cole had waved in earlier hearings now looked like something pulled from a shredder. Still, when Patterson called for closings, Cole rose and walked to the center of the room like he owned it. "Your Honor," he began, "my client has been painted as a villain. In reality, this is a misunderstanding that got swept up in overzealous accusations and media attention. Mr. Reynolds has provided housing in this city for years. His reputation is being destroyed based on assumptions and incomplete facts. Maya listened, every word scraping across her nerves. When it was her turn, she stood slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. "Your Honor," she said, "this is not about a misunderstanding. This is about a pattern." She spoke of Harmony Solutions, of the shell companies, of tenants in other cities whose stories matched Teresa's down to the fake deposits on their statements. She talked about the eviction notice that came after Teresa asked for basic repairs, the way Reynolds used fear as a tool. She turned toward the bench, then toward the gallery. "Teresa Carter is not a line item on a spreadsheet," she said. "She is a mother who worked nights, who paid every dollar she owed, who kept every receipt because she knew one day somebody might question her honesty. This court has seen who was actually lying." When she sat down, Teresa reached under the table and gripped her hand. Her palm was damp and cold. Patterson took his time. The room was so quiet, Maya could hear the scratch of his pen as he finished writing. Finally, he set it down and looked up. "In the matter of Carter versus Reynolds," he said, "this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The eviction is void. All alleged arrears are canceled. The defendant is ordered to compensate Ms. Carter for the hardship caused by this wrongful action." There was a beat of silence, then a low murmur, then applause broke out from the back row, spreading forward until Patterson had to tap his gavel once, more out of habit than real annoyance. "As for the counterclaim for defamation," he continued, "that action is dismissed with prejudice. Given the evidence of fabricated financial documents and suspect affidavits, this court is referring the conduct of Mr. Reynolds, his associated entities, and counsel of record to the appropriate prosecutorial and disciplinary bodies for further review." Teresa sagged against Maya and then suddenly wrapped her in a hug that knocked the breath out of both of them. "You did it," she sobbed. "You really did it." Maya hugged her back, holding on as much to steady herself as Teresa. Around them, reporters were already slipping out to call their editors. By evening, the headlines would use the same phrase over and over. "Black teen attorney who took down a slumlord." It sounded flattering on television. In real life, it landed like a door closing behind her. She could not go back to being the quiet girl in the library anymore, the one nobody noticed. With every nice email, there was another anonymous message telling her to watch herself. Harper still showed up sometimes at the edge of her vision, leaning against a wall outside the courthouse, phone in hand, that thin smile on his face. A week after the ruling, a clerk told her the judge wanted to see her in chambers. When she stepped inside, Patterson was out of his robe, sitting at a cluttered desk, looking suddenly older. "Miss Brooks," he said, standing. "Thank you for coming." He cleared his throat, eyes on a point just past her shoulder. "I owe you an apology. The first day you walked into my courtroom, I let your age speak louder than your words. And if I am honest, I let some other things speak too. Where you are from, what you look like. That was wrong." Maya let the silence stretch. "I do not need an apology, Your Honor," she said finally. "I need fewer people treated the way you treated me and my client that first day." He flinched just a little, but then nodded. "I am going to try," he said. "That may not mean much coming from me, but I am." She gave a small nod and left before the room could get any heavier. Outside, the marble steps of the courthouse gleamed in the afternoon light. She paused halfway down, looking at the spot where Teresa had first stood crying with a crumpled notice in her hand. The place Harper had once told her to walk away while she still could. Cars rushed past. People hurried by, most of them unaware that anything had changed inside the building behind her. Maya tightened her grip on the worn briefcase at her side. She could feel the cost of what had happened like an ache under her ribs. Hours of sleep she would never get back. Parts of her teenage years she had traded for transcripts and motions and fear that came in anonymous calls. "I lost something I will never get again," she thought, staring down at the city that had shaped her. "But at least now I know exactly who I am." 5 years later, the phones at the Justice Collective almost never stopped ringing. The office was cramped, paint peeling in spots, but the walls were covered with flyers about tenants' rights and snapshots of families who still had keys to their homes. Maya Brooks, now in her mid-20s, stood at the front of a church basement on the south side, marker in hand. In front of her sat a room full of older tenants, some with canes, some with grandkids on their laps. "This line here," she said, pointing at a projected lease, "this is where they hide the surprise fees. If you see vague language, push back, ask questions. You do not have to sign something you do not understand." Heads nodded, pens scratched. A woman in the front row looked a lot like Teresa had that first day at the corner store. Exhausted, scared, and then slowly, as the law started to make sense, a little less alone. After the workshop, a man with a press badge waited by the coffee urn. "Remember me?" he asked. "Tyler Jackson Tribune." Maya laughed. "You wrote that piece about the loudmouth teenager who took on a landlord." He grinned. "Turns out that story was the start of something a whole lot bigger. I am here to tell people what you built." Teresa showed up later with a tray of grocery store cupcakes, still in her work polo, her kids taller now. She volunteered twice a week, sitting with new clients, explaining what it felt like when you think you are about to lose everything, and some kid in a borrowed blazer decides you are worth fighting for. One afternoon, Maya found herself back at the courthouse where it all began, this time as a guest speaker on a panel about housing justice, the marble, the echo, the smell of stale coffee in the hallway. None of it had changed. Outside the same courtroom, she saw a black girl around 15 clutching a stack of papers, her mother beside her wiping at silent tears. The girl's jaw was tight in the way Maya recognized from mirrors. Maya walked over, heart tightening at the almost painful sense of déjà vu. "Hi," she said gently. "My name is Maya. I work with tenants. Tell me what is going on." The girl blinked, then started to talk. Same fear, different landlord. New case, same playbook. Later that week, Maya sat in her office going through the mail. Among the envelopes from clients and small-dollar donors was another money order with no return address, the handwriting on the slip careful and shaky. The same amount had arrived every few months since she founded the Justice Collective. No name, just a note, for the work. She had seen a photo in the paper recently. Judge Leonard Patterson at his retirement ceremony. Hair whiter, shoulders softer. She did not need to see a signature to know where the money orders came from. Everyone at that courthouse carried their own ghosts. This, she suspected, was his way of feeding one. That night, alone in the quiet office, she thought about the first day he laughed at her in open court. About the gavel cracking over the sound of other people's amusement. The real consequence of that moment was not Reynolds getting arrested or even Teresa keeping her home, she realized. The real consequence was that being mocked and doubted had forced her to decide who she was going to be, and she had never gone back. Some laughs do not just echo, she thought. They carve you into the person you refuse to stop becoming. If you are watching this and you feel that same knot of anger and hope in your chest, do not let it pass. Share this story. Leave a comment. Stay with our channel so these fights, these small victories, do not disappear into silence. The more of us who keep listening, the harder it gets for people like Reynolds to play their games in the dark.